Hi everyone, welcome back to another week on the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. This week we're working on this piece that's behind me. It's only half complete right now, but this has been a really fun piece. My inspiration for this was kind of a patchwork quilt idea, and that came from, this is a lot of new release decoupage papers from Redesign with Prima that we're going to use, along with some fun stencil techniques, also some new stencil designs, some cool metallic paste we're going to use on there. Comes together really, really pretty, and I'm super excited for how this one turns out. A bunch of new products on there. This was actually the perfect piece for decoupage. When I look for decoupage pieces, I love when they have these little frames outlining the drawers because that gives me a perfect border for the decoupage, and this had a ton of them. So it's kind of a sampler platter of different techniques and different materials, and so I think it's going to be really fun to work on. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Here's what this piece looked like when I brought it home. Again, I picked it for all those little frames. I started out by removing all of the hardware and then giving it a really good cleaning. I chose to go ahead and leave the back hinges on while I paint this, and that's because I want to do some techniques that I need a seamless back for. I scuffed up the existing finish to take the shine down, and now I'm going to go ahead and spray it with primer. I'm choosing a spray primer on this one just because I needed it to use for some live videos, and for time limitations I needed to get a quick coat on. Because I want to add so much decoration to this piece already, I want to keep my background fairly clean and simple. So I'm going to do a simple base of Icing paint, and this color is called Ivory. I went ahead and did 2 coats of my paint over the gray primer, and I got great coverage. Here are my best tips for getting a smooth coat of paint. I use a nice quality synthetic bristle brush. In this case, I'm using one of my Klingon brushes. A little bit of water is also helpful. If you're feeling your paintbrush drag a little bit, I'll just add the tiniest mist of water to help lubricate the surface so that my brush will glide over the top and reduce those brush strokes. I use nice long even linear strokes, and no matter how I brush them on, I come back and do a nice soft wisp over top to level out those brush strokes as much as possible while my paint is still wet. So there is my piece with those 2 coats of ivory on, and now it's time to add some decoration. I'm going to use the Redesign with Prima decoupage gel, and this stuff is so nice because it's super thick. It all stays in one place. It does have a little bit of a shorter open time, so I would say you only have a few minutes to work with this. It also gets really sticky on your fingers, so try to keep it off your hands. I like this stuff because it adheres so well. It's very strong, and it works really great with this Redesign with Prima paper that I'm going to be using because the paper has a little bit of a light texture to it, and this thick gel kind of fills in that texture and gives you a nice smooth finish. Because this stuff works so well, you also want to make sure that you don't let it dry in your brush or it can be a bear to remove. So I started out by brushing a nice smooth even coat of my decoupage gel over the surface of my dried paint. This is a little bit of a thicker paper, so I want to make sure I get a little bit of a thick layer of my decoupage gel underneath, and then I'm going to go ahead and smush that paper right into that decoupage gel. You'll notice that this paper lays really evenly. It's not a super fragile paper, which makes it really user-friendly. This is one that if you make a mistake on your placement, you can pick it up and place it back down again and not risk your paper ripping. Once I've got my placement down, I'm ready to trim the ends. I used a razor blade on this one, but you can also use a sanding block and just sand off the edges of those paper, even with your piece. Once my paper is down, I'm going to come back over top and add another layer of that decoupage gel, and I'm going fairly thick on these. That's because I want that layer from underneath to seep up from underneath, and then I've got my top layer, and it's going to sandwich that paper in between 2 layers of the decoupage gel. With this coat over top, I let it dry, and I can either add another layer of my decoupage gel, or if I need it to match the specific sheen of the rest of my piece, I can also use a different type of clear coat over the top of that. So now I've got all these little tiny squares on the front of my piece, and I'm going to pay attention to those. So I did this piece as part of a new release of papers from Redesign with Prima, and there was a ton of different papers, so I wanted to use as many as possible. And I tried to choose ones that had contrasting colors but that complemented each other so that I could do each of these squares in a different pattern. So I place my paper up to my square. I find my 90-degree corner. On this particular piece, it has these screws in it, and that's because these screw on from the back, and then they have the velvet from the jewelry box laid over top. So to be able to remove the screws, I would have had to cut into the velvet, so I chose to go ahead and leave those. I'm also doing a matching piece of artwork for this piece, and I'm doing that using an old window. So I wanted to show you guys how you can apply decoupage to window, to glass also. And this would be a great technique that you could use if you've got a china cabinet where you want to kind of obscure the glass. You can put the decoupage paper on using the decoupage gel from the reverse, and then when you flip that glass over, it's just going to show the beautiful paper from the front. I used exactly the same process on the glass as I did on the painted piece. I applied my gel, put my paper over top, and then another coat of my gel. When I turn this glass pane around, this is all that you see is that beautiful decoupage print from the front. So this is just going to be a fun little art project that I can stage my piece with and show you guys how to use this on glass. But I want to do a layering technique with my decoupage, so I'm actually going to put a raised stencil over the top, and this is going to add a little bit of texture, a little bit of interest. I'm placing my stencil down using a little bit of painter's tape, and then I'm going to use this gel. This is a metallic icing paste, and it's a pearlescent color, so it catches the light really pretty. It's a nice subtle contrast against the background of my paper. I scoop out a dollop of my paste from my container, and I'm just using the scraper tool from Redesign with Prima to apply this over the top. I squeeze my gel down into that stencil, and then I scrape over top. Squeeze and scrape until I feel like I've completed the entirety of the stencil. And then I'll look back over the top for any places that I missed or didn't get quite even with the surface. I try to keep this stencil as nice and even and clean as possible. I like when they're nice and crisp when I pull the stencil away. So once I've filled all of my stencil with that gel, I can pull this stencil away and you can see how beautiful it is. It's just a little bit of a raised pattern. I did lightly sand this after it dries so it's nice and smooth. Now I'm going to add the same technique to the sides that I did to the top, so it kind of coordinates throughout this piece. I like to repeat some of the techniques so it makes sense. I also thought it was really cool to see how this stencil looked over the top of all the different papers that I used around all the sides of this piece. It looked a little bit different on each side, but my favorite I think was this one that I'm applying it on now. This soft blue color with the sparkly white stencil. It reminds me of snow and snowflakes. And this is a jewelry armoire, so little touches like these sparkly pastes just make it feel a little bit special, a little bit more interesting. You kind of want to rub your hand over it and feel what you're seeing. When I pull that stencil away, again, I've got this lightly raised design and it catches the light so pretty with the shimmer of the metallic gel. So now I'm going to add some waxes to decorate my piece, and this is Annie Sloan Black Wax. I'm just using an artist brush to apply it around the edges of my frames. This is going to kind of camouflage those seams of the paper where it meets up with the trim, and then it just adds a little bit of shading around those boxes for extra interest. I outline the edge of my box using the black wax, and then I'm going to sort of smudge that out just a little bit. This just adds a little bit of shading, so it gives that sort of three-dimensional effect. And I'm going to do this over the top of each of the papers, but where I've got really light papers like the soft blue over the top, I'm going to use a little bit less wax. It just requires a little bit less over that lighter color background. This did take a little bit of time because this piece has quite a few boxes on the front of it, but I went ahead and did this around every single one. Once I've got my black wax details, I also want to bring out that detail frame that's around these boxes, and I'm going to do that using a little bit of gold gilding wax. I'm just going to apply this gold gilding wax using my finger. This is from Redesign with Prima. This color is called Eternal. It's one of the most used in my toolboxes, definitely a good thing to have. You can also use a small artist brush to apply this if you prefer. This piece is complete. I did seal this one up in a final coat of clear coat over the top of all of my piece to make the sheen consistent. I staged this one with some soft pink flowers to pull out that pink paper, and then you can see my matching art piece above it that I made with that old vintage window. I'm definitely getting that patchwork quilt vibe from this piece that I wanted. This was a fun one to work on. You guys can find links for everything I use in the description for this post. You can find more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com. If you like this video, I hope you'll click that subscribe button.